so I'm just going to dive right in. I want you to think about problems that currently affect our world. I'm going to be talking about two. I'm going to be talking about two. So, right now, we're stuck. You may not realise it, but we are. And so, just by saying that, I've already mentioned the second problem, is that either that no one knows, or really no one cares. Now, you may argue that climate change, this whole big global warming thing, is one of our more serious problems. But hey, guess what? Global warming, it's natural. It happens every few 100,000 years. That's why in Ice Age ends, we then get global cooling to start the new ones. And I would admit, it's happening a bit quicker now thanks to us. If it was going to happen anyway, why do we waste our efforts trying to save a doomed planet? Why not do what others have done and try to leave? Because in 1969, three astronauts changed the world. They rode this, the Saturn V, the biggest rocket ever built, and 3 days later, two of them became the first ever people to walk on another celestial body, the moon. In that moment, mankind was a multi-planetary species. We regained our sense of exploration and adventure that had been lost since the early 1800s. We could look at where we had come, 250,000 miles away, and say, we did it. Cars ground to a halt, people celebrating the streets, and it didn't matter what nationality you were from. People felt proud that not a nation, but a planet had achieved greatness. Then some taxpayers said, let's stop. And that was that. We just gave up, all because of this stupid thing called money. Even the Apollo program, the program that got man to the moon, was cut short because of money. No, what we said was, it's quite expensive building all these big rocket things. Instead, we're going to stop. We're going to allow this whole global warming thing to continue. Then we're going to make a great film called The Day After Tomorrow, just to scare people about it. Because, obviously global warming causes the whole world to freeze over. It's clear, isn't it? No. Earth is doomed. We need a new home. And we have found one. It's a planet named after... the Roman god of war. A planet that is far, far away, yet astronomically it's only around the corner. A dead world, a world where nothing grows, one that is frozen over. Yet, believe it or not, Mars used to be a warm, wet planet, just like Earth. It used to be rain and oceans that covered this now dead world. What we're getting here is we're getting global warming. Mars had global cooling. There could have even been life, life, just around the corner. It could have been a world just like Earth. But sadly, it froze. Now it is dead, but we can resurrect it. And how do we do that, you may ask? Well, if you're a global warming protester, I suggest you shut your ears, because we humans, we're pretty good at warming up planets. We've given Earth a real boost and can really jumpstart things on Mars. So, how do we do this? Well, there's two ways we need to do it. The first way is the natural way. We get some nice big mirrors in orbit, we redirect sunlight and heat, and that will warm Mars up. The other way is we do what we good are, we pollute. What we do is, we build big factories, we burn fossil fuels, and we release not greenhouse gases, but I know, super greenhouse gases, that's the stuff. So, over 1,000 years, Mars will go from that dead world to this green world here. So you're probably thinking now, okay, we have a place to go. We can be safe. Well, why don't we go then? Well, it's not that we're thinking that we need to build these massive, Star Wars type ships to get there, because we don't. It's more a fact of money. You see, people are not really willing to put forward the money. And I compare it to what I call the tube station dilemma. Let's imagine we've got a tube station, and let's say it hasn't been refurbished for 50 years and it's going derelict. You've got two options. You can either close the tube station for a month and fix it. Only issue is you're going to have that 1 month of disruption. Or we don't close the tube station, we allow the tubes to keep running, but it's going to continually break. Eventually, it's going to break. We're going to have to close the tube station for much longer than just that 1 month, which is not going to just disrupt that tube station, but it's going to disrupt all the tube stations in the area. Now you might be thinking, well, how does that relate to our situation here? Well, the disruption is the money that we need to put forward for space flights. The station is actually our rockets that we need to build. And the people who are complaining are those taxpayers, because I can guarantee you, were the same people who complain about that 1 month of disruption will be the same people who say, why didn't they just stop the problem from happening in the first place? But you see, we may have all these problems, but we nearly did it once. We nearly went to Mars once, and this wasn't last year. This was back in the 1990s. There's a man, thank you, there's a man, an expert, named Robert Zubin. He, with the help of another man named David Baker, designed a Mars mission called Mars Direct. The way this program works, it works completely different to any other idea that had ever been drawn up in the first place. What he decided, he said, we're not going to send one ship to Mars, we're going to send 2 small ships. The first ship, which is in the background over there, is the return ship. We're going to send the return ship first, with no one in it. When it lands, it's not going to have any fuel in it. It would have used all its fuel to get there. But Mars has got a carbon dioxide atmosphere. We can bring with us a bit of hydrogen, and we can make methane oxygen rocket fuel. So we can actually make our stuff to get home there. This is what they used to do when they went out exploring. They'd live off the land. And then, after 2 years, which is the period it takes for Mars and Earth to become aligned so you can then launch, we then send this one in the middle, the HAB, or Habitation Module. This will launch. It takes 6 months to get to Mars. It takes 6 months to get to Mars. Once it landed, the people will spend a 501-day stay on the Mars. They then climb into the Earth return vehicle, take the 6-month trip back. This cost $55 billion. That may sound like a lot of money. That fits, spread over 10 years, into NASA's existing budget. And that is compared to the $450 billion plan NASA were working on at the time, which would have cost America more than the entirety of World War II in adjusted figures. So you might be thinking, okay, they put this plan forward, unbelievable, completely different. They were flown all over America. People were celebrating, wow, we can go to Mars. They were saying we can be at Mars by the end of the millennia. Well, the reason we didn't go was, if you're in the space station team, you won't need it. Budget was going to be cut slightly. If you're in the Hubble Space Telescope team, you won't need it. Budget was going to be cut slightly. If you're in the Moon Exploration team, you won't need it. Your budget was going to be cut slightly. As you can see, a bit of a resistance started forming inside of NASA. This agency, which had promised so much back in the 60s, seemed now more interested in making everyone happy, rather than pursuing peaceful space exploration like it was meant to. In fact, believe it or not, at this present time, NASA doesn't even launch people into space. They built this great thing called the Space Shuttle. When they built it, they didn't know what they were going to do with it, though. They just built it. Hey, it'll be fun to build a big ship. So they built 5. They built ships. It flew for 30 years, and they're like, yeah, we've had enough of those. We've got nothing to do with them now, so we're going to ground them. Meanwhile, today, all astronauts going to the space station launch in a Russian-built Soyuz capsule. While it's not reusable, the design was first made back in the 1960s. These have been flying for over twice the amount of time the Space Shuttle did. Believe it or not, NASA don't even launch cargo anymore. They rely on private organisations such as Elon Musk's SpaceX to take cargo to and from the space station. It would seem like this agency has given up. But, you see, you might be thinking, okay, I've given up, but there's another point here about all these people working together, and that is that space is very important. That's the space station. Space is very important for our cooperation. Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, he was a Russian cosmonaut. Cosmonaut is a Russian astronaut. He said this, just after he returned to Earth. He said, looking at the Earth from afar, you realise it is too small for conflict and just big enough for cooperation. And this is so very true, because I've got an idea, it's a great idea, okay? What I'll do is I'm going to design a project. 20 years is a good timeline, 20 years. Russia and America have got to work together, because you know they love to get along. It's not complicated enough. China, I've got to put China in there too, still not complicated enough. Let's put the EU, no, not the EU, UK is going to be in there. Europe, the landmass, is going to be in there, and yes, us UK non-team player people, we're going to be in there. So at the moment, we've got about 30 countries. Japan as well, let's not forget Japan, can't make it that easy. Okay, so we've got 20 or 30 countries here. They have to get along for 20 years or people will die. Okay? Now you're probably thinking, this would never happen. All those different ideas and egos, they'd all be fighting like mad. Yeah, 20 years ago, nearly 20 years ago, the first module of the International Space Station, named, and please forgive my Russian accent, Zadra, was launched. And since it was first occupied in the year 2000, there's been a permanent presence in space of men, women, and once even some pregnant rats. And when tensions on Earth rose between the two nuclear superpowers just a few years ago, the members in space still sat down as if nothing was happening. So, you see, this is very important, this whole cooperation thing. Any team that leaves Earth will not only be responsible for sort of pursuing mankind, but they'll be responsible for uniting all the countries on Earth together on this idea that we are not a collection of nations, but a planet. You see, people do want this. People do want us to be united. And you might be thinking, how do I know? Well, it's because when I searched Google for the flag of Earth, this is what came up. And these were just the first options. These are 12 different flags people have drawn up. Now, some of them may seem a bit obvious. You've got the United Nations, as an example. You might think that's quite obvious. Perhaps even all the flags of Earth together. But this one in the middle is my personal favourite. It's blue for the oceans, but it's not a blue that disappears against the white of our spaceships or the blackness of space. That pattern in the middle is a circle. Well, Earth, it's made of circles, Earth, but it's also a flower, represents life. If you haven't worked out yet, 7 rings, 7 continents. And they're all linked together. You can't pull one ring away from the other. It shows that mankind is actually one big community. We are not a collection of nations, we are this community. This is designed for when we venture out into space. It will not be a repeat of the moon landings when America illegally, and it is illegal, put their flag down and said we own the moon, because by law no nation can own a planet or any celestial body, but they thought they did. So they put this flag down, but no, you can't do that. That would be a bit more like it, because we're a collection of nations. Technically we can own it, because we're not a country. So this is our flag. So right, okay, so you think, right, we've got our missions designed, we've got our flag ready, but we still haven't gone. Why is that? Well, there's another problem with humans. We find it really easy to worry about our own personal future, and very hard to worry about the future of everyone else. Even animals, a newly born goat, for example, will care more about the future of its species because it's driven to pass down its genome. We're not. We're driven to worry about ourselves. We worry about our genome after we've had a kid. But no, goats care about it beforehand. How do they do that? Well, they fend off predators, they eat, they relocate, and they reproduce. We're quite good at eating and reproducing. The only predators we seem to have are each other, which is just a bit of a shame. In terms of relocating, we never seem that great at it. We only seem to move, maybe over an ocean, at the most. A few people do go up into space, but only for 6 months. Our British guy, he's going back up there. He obviously missed it. Don't blame him. Anyway, so you see, we only seem to go for short periods. But if I just compare this to something in history, if we think about all the problems I've spoken about, we've got money, more important problems than motivation. But in 1492, there were a lot of problems in Spain. There was a war happening, which caused economic problems, and that lowered people's motivation. Yet Christopher Columbus set sail, and he discovered the New World. So why can't we? Why can't we go forth and discover the real New World, the second Earth? Why do we stay at home? Why can't we grow up like a child growing up? Eventually that child will move out, so why don't we? All I have left to say is this: Ad Astra, to the stars. Thank you very much.